the secret worlds beneath the earth. Perhaps every time we walk through a forest, sit beneath the shade of trees, or watch green fields stretching endlessly in the wind, we forget that the most important part of life often exists where no one can see it. Beneath the quiet darkness of the soil, there is another world, a world of roots weaving together in silence, chemical signals moving invisibly underground, tiny organisms cooperating to keep entire forests alive, and ancient systems that have quietly supported life on Earth for hundreds of millions of years. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, the deepest parts of the human mind are much like roots. We rarely see them directly, and yet those invisible layers quietly support memory, emotion, instinct, and the entire inner structure of who we are. Tonight, in this video, we will slowly descend into the silent world beneath the ground. You will discover how roots sense the world without a brain, the underground networks that resemble a biological internet of the forest, ancient root systems older than human civilization itself, and why part of Earth's climate future may be hidden directly beneath our feet. But this is not only a scientific journey, it is also a very slow journey through invisibility, connection, and the quiet but essential things that hold life together. Because sometimes, the most powerful things are not the ones reaching highest toward the sky, but the ones quietly anchoring themselves in darkness so that everything else does not collapse. If you enjoy gentle stories before sleep, journeys through nature, history, the universe, and the deeper layers of the human mind, then subscribe to Stories for Sleep and continue traveling with us through quiet nights like this one. And now, take one slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Listen to the distant sound of wind moving through the nighttime forest, and let us descend together into the hidden world of roots, where life silently begins beneath the deep, dark soil of this planet. Part 1. The secret world beneath the ground. Perhaps one of the strangest truths about life on Earth is the fact that the things holding the world together are often the things human beings almost never see. We notice towering forests, rivers glittering beneath sunlight, fields swaying softly in the wind, and tree canopies trembling gently in summer air. But very rarely do we think about what exists beneath all of it, deep below the soil, where sunlight never reaches, where there are no birdsong, no open skies, no visible movement. Another world exists, a world that is silent, slow, almost invisible, yet quietly supports all life above it. It is the world of roots. According to Jung, human beings are naturally drawn toward what is visible: success, light, beauty, and everything easily seen from the outside. But Jung believed that the forces truly shaping human life often exist deep within the unconscious, just as roots quietly hold an entire forest upright. Perhaps that is why the image of roots feels strangely emotional, because somewhere very deep inside ourselves, we instinctively understand every living thing requires something invisible beneath it. Imagine a forest at night, wind moving softly through leaves, mist slowly settling over the ground. Everything above seems calm and still. Yet beneath the dark soil, millions of roots are spreading, searching for water, exchanging signals, and quietly keeping the entire forest alive. Scientifically, a tree is not only the trunk and leaves we see. Most of its life actually unfolds underground. There, roots absorb water, gather minerals, prevent erosion, unfold them, and connect the tree to the entire surrounding ecosystem. Jung believed the human unconscious works in a very similar way. We rarely see directly deep memories, instincts, fears, or old emotional wounds, and yet those invisible layers quietly shape how we love, how we react, and how we exist within the world. Perhaps That is why nature feels psychologically familiar, because it reflects the structure of our own minds. If we think carefully, a tree cannot rise high into the sky unless its roots reach deeply into darkness. The taller it grows upward, the deeper it must anchor below. Jung believed the same is true for human beings. A truly mature soul cannot live only on the surface of consciousness. We must understand our darker parts, face the unconscious, and accept the depth within ourselves. Perhaps roots feel peaceful to us because they quietly remind us real strength is rarely loud. Imagine a great river, water endlessly flowing past. End of thing. Stones, forests, and open fields. We see sunlight sparkling on the surface, but very rarely do we remember that the underground network of roots is helping keep the river alive. Roots hold soil in place, prevent erosion, absorb rainwater, and slowly release moisture back into the environment. Without them, many rivers would dry out, shift unpredictably, or become destructive floods. Jung believed people often realize the value of something only after it disappears. Perhaps that is why the modern world sometimes feels spiritually exhausted. We have become obsessed with speed, visibility, and surfaces, while forgetting the invisible systems quietly maintaining balance beneath everything. If we think gently about it, every meal human beings eat somehow begins with roots. Fields of grain, fruit trees, vegetables, entire civilizations, all sustained by invisible systems beneath the soil. Jung believed human beings often forget. We are not separate from nature. We are literally nourished by silent processes unfolding underground. Perhaps that is why gardens feel healing, because somewhere within the unconscious, we recognize life is still quietly functioning according to ancient and stable rhythms. If you imagine looking beneath a large tree, it is almost difficult to believe what may exist below the surface. Roots twisting together, spreading outward, wrapping around stone, navigating obstacles, and searching for water in total darkness. Jung believed the unconscious mind resembles a root system. It is invisible, non-linear, yet quietly connecting every experience in our lives. Perhaps that is why many people feel strangely calm while walking through forests, because forests do not only touch the senses, they touch something very deep within the mind itself. If we think about it long enough, roots are almost never admired. People do not photograph roots the way they photograph sunsets, celebrate roots the way they celebrate flowers, or stand in awe of roots the way they admire giant trees. And yet without roots, every visible beauty above would collapse. Jung believed many of the most important things in human life are invisible in the same way. Trust, memory, and belonging, and inner stability. They quietly prevent the soul from falling apart. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson roots are trying to teach us, that the most essential things rarely exist where there is the most light. If we imagined the earth itself as a living body, then root systems would resemble vines, nervous systems, and the invisible architecture supporting the planet. They store carbon, create soil, nourish microorganisms, and sustain the cycles of life itself. Jung believed people often feel lonely because they imagine themselves as separate beings. But in nature, everything is deeply connected. One root system may influence water movement, forests, animals, and even the climate of an entire region. Perhaps that is why nature feels wiser than humanity, because it understands something we often forget. No living thing truly exists alone. If we think softly about it, roots live almost entirely in darkness, and strangely, that darkness is where life begins. Jung believed the unconscious is not something frightening. It is the source of intuition, creativity, memory, and healing. Perhaps human beings fear darkness only because we have not yet learned how to listen to what is alive inside it. Imagine tonight, outside your window, trees standing quietly beneath moonlight, leaves moving gently in the wind, everything above appearing calm and still. But somewhere beneath the soil, another world continues, growing, connecting, searching for water, and supporting the entire forest in silence. Jung believed the human mind works the same way. Beneath speech, thought, and daily life, there remains an invisible layer, quietly shaping everything. Perhaps that is why the image of roots feels almost sacred, because they remind us that every living thing on earth, every forest, every river, every harvest, and even human beings themselves, is supported by quiet forces that the eye almost never sees. And perhaps that is the gentlest truth nature offers us. The strongest things are not always the ones reaching highest toward the light. Sometimes they are the things growing silently in darkness, unseen by anyone, while quietly holding the entire world above them together. Part 2. How roots sense the world without a brain. Perhaps one of the most quietly astonishing things in nature is the fact that a root system can find its way through darkness without eyes, a brain, or any form of consciousness resembling our own. Deep beneath the cold soil, where no light exists, a tiny root tip can still sense gravity, determine direction, avoid solid rock, search for water, and weave through the softest layers of earth with a precision that almost feels impossible to believe. According to science, the tips of roots contain tiny starch-filled particles called statoliths. They function like a primitive biological compass. When a plant changes position, these microscopic particles shift in response to gravity, helping the root understand which direction is downward. No thoughts, no awareness, no eyes seeing the path ahead. And yet, the roots continue finding their way. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, this touches something very deep within the human soul. That intelligence does not always come from reason. Sometimes, the part of us that understands the path most clearly is also the quietest part. Imagine a tiny seed buried beneath the earth, surrounded only by darkness, moisture, and the pressure of soil and stone. It does not know where the sky is, what sunlight means, or how vast the world above might be. And somehow, the moment it begins to germinate, its roots immediately grow downward, while its shoots rise upward toward the unseen light. Jung believed human beings carry a similar invisible orientation within themselves. He described it through instinct, the unconscious, and ancient psychological structures existing beneath awareness. Perhaps that is why many important decisions in life do not come entirely from logic. Sometimes we simply feel where safety exists, what is right, or which direction we should continue moving toward, like roots quietly sensing gravity in darkness. If we think deeply about it, a root does not actually see water, it only senses moisture, chemical traces in the soil, and tiny environmental changes around it. Each root tip moves slowly, almost beyond perception. Yet together, an entire root system can spread across enormous distances, locate hidden underground water, and avoid dead soil. Jung believed the unconscious mind works in a similar way. We rarely understand directly why anxiety appears, why a place feels uncomfortable, or why someone instantly feels trustworthy. And yet, somewhere beneath consciousness, the mind is quietly processing countless invisible signals. Perhaps that is why intuition often feels mysterious, because it resembles a root system, unable to see the whole landscape, yet somehow still knowing where to move. Imagine a tiny root tip pushing through soil. Ahead of it are hard stone, dry earth, or spaces impossible to cross. The root does not panic. It simply It curves around obstacles and continues searching for another path. No frustration, no despair, only silent and patient adaptation. Jung believed this reflected a deep wisdom of the unconscious. Human beings suffer greatly when consciousness tries to control life entirely through logic, but something older within us understands. Life rarely unfolds in straight lines. Perhaps that is the gentle lesson roots are trying to teach, that not every correct path needs to be fully visible from the beginning. If we think softly about it, roots never rush. They grow, millimeter by millimeter, branch by branch, in near total silence. And yet over time, they can break stone, stabilize mountainsides, and nourish entire forests. Jung believed inner growth works the same way. Healing is rarely dramatic. It often happens slowly, invisibly, and silently. Perhaps that is why nature feels comforting, because it reminds us all real growth requires time in darkness. Imagine the underground world beneath an entire forest, millions of root tips simultaneously, searching for water, avoiding toxins, and interacting with the surrounding environment. There is no central commander, no brain directing the system, and yet the network operates with astonishing intelligence. Jung believed the human mind is not entirely governed by conscious thought either. Most psychological life, memory, emotion, instinct, and intuition operates beneath awareness. Perhaps that is why many people feel exhausted when trying to live only through logic, because the deepest parts of life were never fully rational to begin with. If we think carefully, roots do not need to understand the entire forest to know what to do next. They simply sense, respond, and continue growing. Modern people often crave certainty, perfect plans, and absolute answers. But the unconscious works differently. It behaves more like roots, feeling first, understanding later. Perhaps that is why the most important moments in life often begin with something very quiet. A feeling, a dream, or a pull impossible to explain logically. Imagine a great tree during a storm. Above ground, everything shakes violently. Branches bend, leaves whip through the wind. Yet beneath the earth, the root system remains silently anchored. Jung believed consciousness resembles the exposed canopy of the tree, while the unconscious resembles the roots, ancient, deep, and far more stable than we realize. Perhaps that is why human beings need silence, because only in silence can we hear the psychological roots within ourselves. If we think about it long enough, human beings often define intelligence as fast thinking, analysis, and control. But roots reveal another kind of intelligence, a wisdom that is silent, instinctive, and deeply connected to its environment. Jung believed modern civilization sometimes makes people forget we are still creatures of instinct. Beneath identity, work, and social roles, there remains something far more ancient. A part of us that senses danger, searches for belonging, and recognizes what truly nourishes the soul. Perhaps that is why the image of roots always feels spiritual, because they quietly mirror something profoundly deep within human beings themselves. Imagine tonight, a forest sleeping beneath pale moonlight. Everything above the ground appears calm, still, and almost motionless. Yet somewhere deep beneath the soil, millions of roots continue, sensing, searching, adapting, and growing in darkness. No sound, no witnesses, and yet life continues, moving. Jung believed the human soul develops the same way. The deepest transformations are rarely loud, rarely dramatic, and often unfolding in invisible layers of the mind. Perhaps that is the most beautiful truth roots offer us before sleep, that you do not always need to see the entire path in order to continue forward. like roots moving through dark soil. Sometimes the wisest part within you already knows the direction, long before the rational mind understands why. Part 3. The hidden network between trees and fungi. Perhaps one of the most quietly extraordinary things in nature is the fact that a forest is not truly made of separate trees. Beneath the deep darkness of the soil, where no human eye can see, there exists a living network that is constantly connecting, exchanging, supporting, and silently keeping the entire ecosystem alive. For centuries, human beings believed that trees lived alone, that they simply grew upward, absorbed water, and competed against one another in silence. But modern science slowly began discovering something astonishing. Beneath the earth, tree roots are cooperating with another world, the world of fungi. Tiny fungal threads, called mycorrhizae, spread through the soil like invisible roads. They attach themselves to roots, extend the plant's ability to absorb nutrients, search for minerals, and transport water through spaces roots alone could never reach. And in return, trees send downward sugars, energy, and nutrients created from sunlight. A silent exchange has continued this way for hundreds of millions of years. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, this touches something profoundly deep within the human psyche, that no living being truly exists alone. Imagine a forest at night. Everything above the ground appears quiet, motionless, almost asleep beneath the moonlight. But somewhere beneath the soil, billions of fungal threads are still, spreading, transmitting signals, and connecting roots together. In darkness, an old tree can send carbon to younger trees, share nutrients, or help weaker trees survive periods of drought. Jung believed the collective unconscious of humanity functions in a similar way. Even though we experience ourselves as separate individuals, our minds remain invisibly connected through memory, symbols, emotions, and ancient psychological patterns shared across humanity. Perhaps that is why forests often feel almost conscious, because somewhere very deep, they truly are speaking to themselves. If we think deeply enough, a single fungal thread, almost invisible to the naked eye, can become part of a network stretching for kilometers underground. Scientists sometimes call these mycorrhizal systems the Wood Wide Web, a biological internet far older than any technology humans have ever created. Through this underground network, trees can share resources, send warnings, and respond collectively to environmental changes. There are no servers, phones, or human language, and yet the entire system operates with astonishing intelligence. Jung believed this mirrors a very deep truth about human life. Modern people often believe they are completely independent, completely separate, entirely self-made. But in reality, every soul is nourished by countless invisible connections. Perhaps that is why prolonged isolation hurts human beings so deeply, because somewhere inside our ancient instincts, we were made for connection. Imagine a young sapling growing in a dense forest. It receives almost no sunlight of its own, and yet through the fungal network underground, larger trees can silently transfer carbon to it, as though the entire forest is gently supporting the next generation. Jung believed the collective unconscious works in much the same way. Human beings are shaped not only by personal experience, we are also nourished by ancestors, culture, collective memory, and ancient symbols that existed long before we were born. Perhaps that is why certain dreams and emotions feel universal, because somewhere beneath individual consciousness, all minds still share the same hidden root system. If we think softly about it, fungi and trees are not friends in the sentimental human sense. They simply evolved together across immense stretches of planetary time. Neither side is fully self-sufficient. Trees need fungi to extend their reach into the soil. Fungi need trees for energy from sunlight. Jung believed a healthy life is never built from complete isolation. Human beings become truly mature only when they learn connection, exchange, and conscious interdependence. Perhaps that is why nature often feels wiser than modern society, because it understands something humans frequently forget. The strongest forms of life are not created through separation. They emerge through symbiosis. Imagine the entire forest as a living body. Then the fungal network beneath the ground becomes something like a nervous system, a circulatory system, or invisible pathways coordinating the whole organism. A tree, under attack from insects, can send chemical warnings into the network. Nearby trees begin changing their defenses, increasing protective compounds, and preparing for danger before it arrives. Jung believed human beings influence one another in similar invisible ways. Fear, hope, grief, and emotional states can silently spread through families, communities, and even entire generations. Perhaps that is why the collective unconscious is so powerful, because no mind is ever truly isolated. If we think about it long enough, a healthy forest does not operate according to the logic of the strongest survive alone. Its survival depends upon cooperation, exchange, and delicate balance among countless living beings. Jung believed the human ego constantly desires control, domination, and separation from the rest of existence. But the deeper soul understands all life is interdependent. Perhaps that is why so many people feel healed when walking through forests, because somewhere in the unconscious, we remember that we, too, belong to something larger. Imagine the darkness beneath the soil no one sees, and fungal threads thinner than silk, streams of carbon moving from tree to tree, or chemical signals silently traveling through the earth. And yet the entire system continues functioning, quietly, patiently, endlessly. Jung believed many of the most important things within the human soul are just as invisible. We rarely see directly, undim, memory, intuition, or deep emotional connection. And yet these invisible things quietly shape the entire inner life. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson of roots and fungi, that the strongest connections in existence are often the ones no eye can see. If we think deeply enough, modern humanity has built the internet to seal media and enormous communication systems. But beneath the ground, nature created its own network long before humans appeared, a system that requires no electricity, no screens, and no machines, yet remains capable of sharing, warning, and sustaining collective life. Jung believed the collective unconscious functions similarly, an invisible network connecting human minds through myth, dreams, archetypes, and emotions ancient enough to belong to all humanity. Perhaps that is why forests often feel almost sacred, because they quietly mirror the deepest architecture of the human psyche itself. Imagine tonight, somewhere outside, a forest sleeping softly beneath moonlight, wind moving gently through the leaves, mist settling onto the dark earth. Everything above the ground appears calm, silent, and separate. But beneath the soil, a vast living network continues, connecting tree to tree, fungus to root, water to earth, and life to life. No sound, no witnesses, and yet the forest continues speaking to itself in darkness. Jung believed the human soul exists the same way. Even when we feel separate, somewhere deep beneath consciousness, all minds remain invisibly connected through memory, emotion, symbolism, and the ancient need to belong to something larger than ourselves. And perhaps that is the gentlest truth roots and fungi offer us before sleep, that no living being truly survives alone. Beneath the surface of all things, there are always invisible networks, silently holding the world together. Part 4. roots that changed an entire planet. Perhaps one of the most humbling truths about life on Earth is the fact that a huge part of this planet was transformed by things as soft and silent as roots. When human beings imagine forces powerful enough to shape worlds, we usually think of volcanoes, earthquakes, oceans, or giant asteroids falling from space. But somewhere beneath our feet, another force has been quietly reshaping the Earth for hundreds of millions of years. No noise, no light, no audience, only roots, slipping through stone, holding soil together, guiding water, and silently rebuilding the world day after day. From Jung's perspective, human beings often define power through loudness, speed, and domination. But nature repeatedly reveals something else. The most powerful forces often work in silence. Perhaps that is why roots always feel almost spiritual, because they quietly remind us the deepest transformations rarely happen on the surface. Imagine Earth hundreds of millions of years ago. The planet looked vastly different from today. Many landscapes were barren rock, dry terrain, and almost incapable of supporting complex life. Then plants appeared. At first, they were small and primitive, but eventually, something extraordinary happened. Plants evolved roots, and from that moment onward, the entire planet slowly began changing. Roots entered cracks in stone, released organic acids, and gradually broke ancient rock into smaller particles. Across immense stretches of time, stone became soil. Jung believed the unconscious transforms the human psyche in a similar way. Experiences like grief, memory, and emotional wounds rarely change us instantly. Instead, they sink slowly into deeper layers of the mind, and over time, quietly reshape the entire inner world. Perhaps that is why nature feels psychologically familiar, because it moves according to the same slow and profound rhythm as the human soul. If we think deeply enough, every forest on Earth began with the ability of roots to hold soil together. Without roots, rain would wash soil away, rivers would become unstable, and many regions would slowly turn into deserts. But the enormous underground web of roots holds soil in place, water within ecosystems, and entire landscapes together. Jung believed human beings also require inner root systems, things like memory, belief, belonging, and deep emotional connection quietly keep the psyche from collapsing during life's changes. Perhaps that is why so many people feel lost in the modern world, because we are increasingly disconnected from the things that once kept the soul grounded. Imagine a river moving through an ancient forest. At first glance, it seems the water itself shapes the river, but beneath the soil, roots are, holding the riverbanks, controlling water flow, absorbing rainfall, and influencing where water can travel. Scientists now understand that Earth's entire water cycle is deeply influenced by plant life and root systems. Forests can create rainfall, preserve moisture, and even alter regional climates. Jung believed the deepest forces within the human mind are similarly invisible. We often assume our lives are directed entirely by conscious thought, but beneath awareness still exist instinct, the unconscious, and ancient psychological patterns quietly guiding our path. Perhaps that is the gentle lesson of roots, that the strongest things are not always visible. If we think long enough, every root system simultaneously searches for water, stores carbon, nourishes microorganisms, and changes the structure of the soil itself. Today, scientists believe enormous amounts of Earth's carbon are stored underground because of roots, not inside skyscrapers, technologies, or cities, but inside silent living networks beneath our feet. Jung believed this is almost a perfect image of the unconscious. Human beings usually focus only on thoughts, speech, and visible actions. Yet most psychological energy is actually stored in invisible inner depths. Perhaps that is why darkness and underground spaces carry such strong symbolic power, because they represent origins, memory, and the hidden systems sustaining life itself. Imagine a great tree growing through solid rock. It does not survive through explosive force. Its roots simply go deeper, remain patient, and continue pressing through tiny cracks in stone. Across years, centuries, and sometimes millennia, the stone eventually breaks open. Jung believed inner transformation works the same way. Human beings rarely change only through dramatic moments. Healing usually comes through tiny changes, repeated silently, across very long periods of time. Perhaps that is why nature always feels wise, because it never rushes, and yet it changes entire worlds if we think gently about it. All fertile soil supporting human civilization today ultimately began with broken stone, decomposing leaves, and countless generations of roots quietly working in darkness. Modern people often desire immediate results, visible success, and rapid transformation. But the deepest forms of life are always built slowly, just as roots transformed an entire planet without anyone hearing them. Perhaps that is why ancient forests inspire awe, because somewhere in the unconscious, we recognize that we are standing inside the result of millions of years of silent patience. Imagine Earth itself as a living organism, then roots become its circulatory system, its water regulation system, and its invisible structural framework. They prevent soil from disappearing, create conditions for life, and maintain balance between atmosphere, water, and land. Jung believed the human soul also requires invisible structures like these. Without depth, connection, and grounding, consciousness becomes fragile. Perhaps that is why people instinctively seek forests when exhausted, because forests quietly embody what the modern mind often lacks: stability, patience, and connection to something older than the self. If we think deeply enough, roots never seek attention. No one praises them like flowers, photographs them like sunsets, or admires them the way we admire giant trees. And yet without roots, nothing above them would survive. Jung believed the most essential things within human beings are often equally invisible: compassion, memory, intuition, and belonging. These quiet inner structures silently keep the psyche standing. Perhaps that is why stories about roots feel emotional, because somewhere deep inside, we recognize ourselves within them. Imagine, tonight, a forest sleeping softly beneath moonlight, leaves barely moving in the night wind, mist covering the dark soil. Everything above ground appears calm, still, almost fragile. Yet beneath that silence, millions of roots continue, holding soil, guiding water, breaking stone, storing carbon, and quietly sustaining life across the planet. No one sees them, no sound emerges from their work, and yet the world survives because of them. Jung believed the deepest parts of the human soul function the same way. The things that truly keep us alive are rarely the loudest or brightest parts of life. Usually they are quiet memories, invisible bonds, and silent depths beneath consciousness. And perhaps that is the most beautiful truth roots offer us before sleep, that the strongest forms of life do not always arrive like storms. Sometimes they simply exist, in darkness, in silence, and in movements so slow they are almost impossible to see, yet powerful enough to quietly reshape an entire planet. Part 5. The giant and ancient root systems. Perhaps one of the most quietly mysterious things about nature is the fact that what we see is usually only a very small part of what life truly is. When standing before a forest, we notice tall trunks, leaves trembling in the wind, sunlight filtering through branches, and trees that seem completely separate from one another. Each tree appears to be an individual life, an independent existence, a solitary being standing alone in the world. But somewhere very deep beneath the ground, everything is profoundly different. There are root systems that have existed for thousands of years, stretch across entire kilometers, and outlive the forests growing above them. According to science, one of the most astonishing examples is the aspen forest. At first glance, it appears to be thousands of separate trees standing side by side, but in reality, the entire forest may actually be a single living organism. The visible trunks above the earth are only temporary shoots, passing extensions, or the exposed surface of something far older and far larger underneath. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, this feels almost like a perfect symbol of the human mind. The ego, the self we recognize every day, may only be a tiny, visible fragment of something much older and more collective beneath consciousness. Imagine walking into an aspen forest in the late afternoon. Wind moves through the leaves, creating a sound soft as flowing water. Golden light slides slowly across pale white trunks. Everything feels gentle, separate, almost fragile. And yet beneath the dark soil, the entire forest is connected by one immense root system, a living structure, ancient, patient, and invisible. Jung believed the collective unconscious functions in much the same way. Even though each person feels separate, unique, isolated inside their own mind, beneath everything, we remain connected through symbols, instinct, ancient memory, and psychological patterns shared by humanity itself. Perhaps that is why nature often feels spiritually familiar, because it quietly reflects the deepest architecture of the human soul. If we think deeply enough, an aspen trunk may collapse or burn in fire, but the root system beneath it continues living, and from those same ancient roots, new trunks slowly emerge. The new forest is still the same ancient being. Jung believed consciousness functions similarly. Our thoughts, social roles, and conscious identities may change throughout life, but beneath them, there still exists a layer of the psyche, far deeper and older, a layer that is not entirely personal, not entirely visible, yet quietly shaping the whole inner world. Perhaps that is why many people feel they carry things not completely their own, ancient fears, strange dreams, emotions impossible to fully explain. Because somewhere beneath consciousness, we remain connected to the entire history of humanity. Imagine the whole forest as one enormous organism. Then the visible trunks become something like temporary memories, passing thoughts, or individual lives appearing and disappearing across time, while the root system beneath represents something more eternal, silent, enduring, and continuously alive through countless generations. Jung believed human beings suffer deeply when they identify entirely with the conscious ego, because the ego is fragile. It fears change, fears loss, and fears impermanence. But the deeper layers of the psyche understand something nature has always known. Life does not exist only in what is visible. Perhaps that is why ancient forests always feel humbling, because somewhere deep within ourselves, we sense that we are standing before something older and larger than our individual lives. If we think gently about it, many root systems on this planet were already alive before civilizations emerged, before cities were built, and before many modern languages even existed. While human beings are born, grow older, and disappear within a few decades, certain root systems quietly continue living across millennia. Jung believed this touches a very deep longing inside the human psyche, the desire to feel connected to something timeless. human beings instinctively seek tradition, mythology, ancestry, and ancient symbols, because the psyche does not want to feel completely temporary. Perhaps that is why roots always feel sacred, because they represent continuity itself. Imagine a powerful wind moving through a forest. Leaves tremble together. At first glance, each tree seems to respond individually, but beneath the ground, they still share the same hidden system. Jung believed this is almost a perfect image of humanity. Every person has a separate name, separate memories, and a separate story. Yet beneath consciousness, we remain connected through fear, love, dreams, and collective archetypes. Perhaps that is why ancient stories appear again and again across different cultures, because they grow from the same invisible psychological root system. If we think deeply enough, modern people are often obsessed with individuality. We want to become different, unique, and entirely independent. But nature quietly reveals something else. The strongest forms of life rarely exist in total separation. A healthy forest survives precisely because everything is interconnected beneath the surface. Jung believed true maturity does not mean becoming completely separate. It means understanding oneself, while simultaneously recognizing that one belongs to something larger. Perhaps that is why forests calm the human mind, because they silently dissolve the illusion that we must survive entirely alone. Imagine the darkness beneath the earth. No one sees ancient root systems, underground rivers, or the invisible layers of life below the surface. And yet those hidden depths keep everything above alive. Jung believed the unconscious works the same way. We rarely see directly where emotions originate, inherited psychological patterns, or the deep motivations inside ourselves. And yet they silently influence our choices, our dreams, and the whole structure of conscious life. Perhaps that is why nature always feels psychologically truthful, because it reflects exactly how the human mind is built. If we think long enough, a visible tree may survive only decades or centuries, but the root system beneath it may continue far longer. Jung believed this mirrors the way individuals appear and disappear, while humanity's collective unconscious continues onward. Ancient myths, symbols, and fears survive across countless generations. Perhaps that is why certain things in human life feel older than ourselves, because they truly are. Imagine tonight an aspen forest trembling softly beneath moonlight, white trunks standing apart, casting separate shadows, and moving independently in the wind. Yet somewhere beneath the deep earth, everything remains connected through one ancient living system, one enormous invisible organism. Jung believed humanity exists the same way. We believe ourselves separate, believe ourselves isolated, yet beneath consciousness, all minds remain rooted in the same collective depths. And perhaps that is the most beautiful truth ancient root systems offer us before sleep, that what we see is rarely the whole of life. Beneath every forest, every human being, and every soul, there always exists an invisible layer, more ancient, more connected, and far deeper than the eye can ever fully perceive. Part 6. The strangest root architectures on Earth. Perhaps one of the most quietly beautiful things about nature is the fact that life never chooses only one way to survive. Human beings often expect everything to have one stable form, one predictable structure, and one understandable pattern. But if we move slowly into the world of roots, we begin to discover something astonishing. Nature is like an endless dream of creativity. Beneath the soil, and sometimes even above the ground, roots have evolved into countless strange forms. Breathing roots, rising from mud, roots hanging from the sky, roots drinking moisture from air, and roots slowly pulling entire plants deeper underground. From Jung's perspective, this reflects a profound truth about the human psyche. Life never truly exists in only one form, and neither does the human soul. Imagine a mangrove forest at dusk. Dark seawater slowly rises with the tide. Soft mud covers the ground. The air feels heavy, humid, and almost motionless. And there, roots rise upward from the mud, like countless dark fingers reaching toward the sky. These are breathing roots. According to science, mangrove soil contains very little oxygen. If roots remained completely buried, the trees would suffocate. So nature created something strange and beautiful, roots that rise upward to breathe air directly. Jung believed human beings possess psychological breathing roots as well. When buried beneath pressure, grief, or emotional exhaustion, the psyche instinctively searches for ways to rise upward, find air, and keep itself alive. Perhaps that is why human beings always need art, dreams, music, and moments of silence. They become invisible breathing tubes for the soul. If we think deeply enough, mangrove roots appear almost unnatural, yet their strangeness is precisely what allows them to survive where most plants cannot. Jung believed many of the deepest parts of ourselves function similarly. The things that make us different, strange, or difficult to understand may also be the very things that help us survive. Perhaps that is why nature always feels compassionate, because it never asks every living thing to become the same. Imagine an orchid growing high upon another tree. It is not rooted in soil like most plants. Instead, its pale roots cling to air, absorb moisture from mist, and drink humidity directly from the wind. These are aerial roots, a form of existence almost dreamlike in its delicacy. Jung believed they resemble souls that are sensitive, creative, and unable to flourish inside ordinary structures. Some people cannot root themselves in conventional systems, cannot survive through rigid expectations, and yet still quietly find nourishment in their own unique way. Perhaps that is why orchids always feel poetic, because they reveal life can survive, even in air itself. If we think softly about it, a field of corn waving in the wind looks simple, familiar, almost ordinary. But beneath those tall stalks, brace roots spread outward, like tiny pillars supporting the plant's entire body. Corn grows quickly and reaches great height. Without these extra roots, strong winds could easily destroy it. So nature evolved additional supports, small hidden legs holding the plant upright. Jung believed human beings also require invisible brace roots. No one stands steadily through life alone. We survive through friendship, memory, family, belief, and habits quietly stabilizing the mind. Perhaps that is why connection matters so deeply, because even the strongest souls still need support. Imagine an ancient banyan tree at night. Long, dark roots descend from its branches, like ancient ropes hanging through the air. Over time, they touch the ground, thicken, and become new trunks themselves. One tree slowly transforms into an entire world. Jung believed this resembles the collective unconscious itself, a its symbol, memory, or ancient idea, can spread outward, create countless new branches, and eventually become an entire psychological structure shared by many minds. Perhaps that is why banyan trees feel sacred across cultures, because they resemble memory becoming physical, or time endlessly reproducing itself. If we think deeply enough, some roots are stranger still. Certain plants slowly pull bulbs, lilies, and storage organs deeper underground over time. They literally reposition themselves to avoid heat, escape cold, and reach safer depths. Jung believed this reflects the gentle process of psychological adaptation. Human beings are constantly adjusting, transforming, and searching for the emotional depth where the soul can safely survive. Perhaps that is why true maturity often feels invisible, because the deepest transformations rarely happen on the surface. Imagine Earth itself as one enormous laboratory of life. Every root system becomes a different idea, a different experiment, a different answer to one ancient question: how can life continue? Jung believed the human psyche is infinitely creative in the same way. There is not only one path toward healing, only one shape of maturity, or only one form of a meaningful life. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson strange roots offer us. That life does not need sameness to become beautiful. If we think long enough, nature never treats difference as failure. Inside forests, strange often means adaptive, resilient, and perfectly evolved for a unique environment. Jung believed people suffer greatly when trying to force themselves into being normal, predictable, or identical to everyone else. But the unconscious understands something deeper. Every soul requires its own path to survive. Perhaps that is why unusual roots feel strangely emotional, because somewhere deep within ourselves, we recognize our own lives inside them. Imagine the darkness beneath the soil tonight. Countless root forms are simultaneously crawling sideways, descending downward, climbing upward, hanging in open air, or weaving through salt water and stone. No design is identical, and yet all of them share the same ancient desire to continue living. Jung believed this is also true of humanity. Beneath ego, social identity, and outward roles, every soul is quietly searching for life, connection, and the ability to continue existing in a changing world. Imagine tonight a forest sleeping softly beneath moonlight. In darkness, strange and beautiful roots continue silently, breathing through mud, drinking moisture from air, supporting heavy trunks, and hanging between earth and sky. No one sees them. No sound rises from their work, and yet the entire planet is quietly sustained by the endless imagination of life itself. Jung believed the human soul exists the same way. There is not only one shape for becoming who you are. There is not only one path for living a meaningful life. And perhaps that is the most beautiful truth these strange roots offer us before sleep, that life always finds a way. Whether in darkness, in salt water, in open air, or beneath the silent soil of this planet, it continues creating endless new forms, simply to survive. One more time. Part 7: Roots and the Silent Struggle for Survival. Perhaps one of the most quietly unsettling things about nature is the fact that, even beneath the most peaceful forests, a silent war is always continuing. When we look at a forest from far away, we often feel stillness, harmony, and the almost perfect balance of nature. Tree canopies sway softly in the wind, sunlight drifts through leaves, birds sing somewhere far within the green shadows. Everything appears gentle, slow, and peaceful beyond words. But beneath the dark soil, another world is silently unfolding. A world where roots compete for every drop of water, trees send warning signals to one another, chemicals are released into the earth, and life quietly struggles to continue existing. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, this touches a very deep truth about existence itself, that darkness does not belong only to human beings. It exists inside every ecosystem. Imagine a forest during the middle of a dry season. Water beneath the ground becomes scarce. Sunlight grows harsher. Suddenly, every tree no longer has enough water, enough minerals, or enough space to grow freely. Deep beneath the soil, root systems begin extending farther. They search, dissense, and silently compete with neighboring roots. According to science, many plants release chemical compounds into the soil to slow the growth of rivals, alter surrounding microorganisms, or make it harder for other plants to absorb nutrients. This phenomenon is called allelopathy, a kind of silent chemical warfare in nature. From Jung's perspective, this mirrors the shadow within the human psyche. Human beings often want to believe they are made only of love, kindness, and light, but beneath consciousness, there still exists competition, fear, survival instinct, and impulses far older than reason. Perhaps that is why nature can feel simultaneously peaceful, yet slightly unsettling, because somewhere deep inside, we recognize ourselves within it. If we think deeply enough, a tree cannot run away, relocate, or escape hardship. It must survive exactly where it was born. And so every struggle of a tree happens slowly, invisibly, and with unimaginable patience. Roots weave through soil, avoid poisoned ground, seek hidden openings, and sometimes quietly prevent neighboring plants from growing. No blood, no sound, yet still a struggle for survival. Jung believed the human shadow is rarely dramatic like stories or films. It often appears quietly, subtly, almost invisibly. A small amount of jealousy, control, fear, or the desperate desire to survive. Perhaps that is the uncomfortable lesson forests whisper to us. Life is not made entirely of gentleness. Imagine two root systems growing toward the same underground water source. They almost resemble living creatures, sensing, reacting, and silently studying each other. Research suggests some plants can even recognize roots of their own species, their offspring, or genetically related neighbors. When encountering family, certain roots compete less aggressively. Jung found this emotionally revealing, because beneath civilization, human beings carry similar ancient instincts, protecting the group, recognizing belonging, distinguishing between our own, and the other. Perhaps that is why so many human conflicts are rooted in instincts older than logic itself. If we think gently about it, nature is never completely good or evil. A tree poisoning competitors does not do so out of cruelty. It is simply trying to continue living. Jung believed the shadow is not pure evil. It is the primitive, instinctive, and necessary aspect of survival. Human beings suffer deeply when pretending the shadow does not exist, because denied darkness often becomes more dangerous. Perhaps that is why Jung believed healing begins when we see our darkness, understand it, rather than endlessly fleeing from it. Imagine beneath the forest floor tonight, countless roots are simultaneously competing, cooperating, signaling, and defending territory. An ecosystem never truly still. Jung believed the human psyche functions the same way. Beneath calm awareness, there still exists conflict, desire, fear, and contradictory forces moving together. Perhaps that is why dreams often feel strange and chaotic, because the unconscious is not a place of perfect order. It is more like a forest, alive, beautiful, and filled with competing forces. If we think long enough, human beings often romanticize nature. We want to believe forests are peaceful, to-dos, and free from conflict. But in reality, nature's balance does not come from the absence of struggle. It emerges from countless tensions, adaptations, and survival processes, silently balancing one another over time. Jung believed psychological maturity works similarly. Inner peace does not mean all conflict disappears. It means learning to coexist with light, darkness, and the full complexity within oneself. Perhaps That is why forests feel psychologically honest, because they never pretend to be perfect. Imagine a large tree releasing chemicals into the earth. Nearby plants slowly weaken. The soil itself begins changing. The entire environment is quietly reshaped to favor only one species. Jung believed human beings unconsciously alter the psychological atmosphere around them as well, through words, emotions, and inner states. A fearful person can silently make an entire room tense. A calm person can make others feel safe without speaking at all. Perhaps that is why shadow work matters so deeply, because what remains buried inside the unconscious still affects the world around us. If we think deeply enough, even during the harshest competition, nature somehow continues preserving collective life. No species wins forever. No ecosystem survives only through domination. Eventually, everything must balance, adapt, or collapse. Jung believed this is equally true for human beings. A healthy psyche is not one made only of light. It is a psyche that recognizes darkness, understands it, and refuses to let it unconsciously control life. Perhaps that is the deepest wisdom forests carry. That acknowledged darkness becomes part of balance. Imagine tonight a forest resting silently beneath the dark sky. Gentle wind moves through leaves. Everything above appears peaceful, soft, almost asleep. Yet somewhere beneath the earth, countless roots continue silently, competing, warning, defending territory, and struggling to survive in darkness. No one sees them, no sound rises from below, and yet the entire forest remains alive. Because of that invisible tension, Jung believed the human soul exists the same way. Beneath calm voices, gentle words, and civilized masks, there always remain shadow, instinct, and ancient forces quietly shaping life itself. And perhaps that is the deepest truth forests offer us before sleep. That life is not created entirely from light, and strangely enough, it is precisely the balance between darkness and light, competition and cooperation, survival and connection, that quietly allows the whole world to continue existing. Part 8. The Roots that Feed Humanity. Perhaps one of the most humbling truths about human civilization is the fact that nearly every life on Earth is quietly supported by roots hidden beneath the soil. Human beings often imagine survival through cities, technology, and enormous systems built above the ground. But long before civilization existed, before roads, electricity, or language itself, there were roots, silent, invisible, patiently transforming sunlight, water, and stone into the foundation of life. Imagine a field at dawn. Mist drifts slowly above the earth. Rows of crops stand quietly beneath pale morning light. Everything visible seems calm and simple, but beneath the soil, millions of roots are constantly absorbing water, exchanging minerals, communicating with microorganisms, and holding entire ecosystems together. Without them, human civilization would disappear almost immediately. Every grain of rice, piece of fruit, loaf of bread, and vegetable harvested from the earth begins somewhere in darkness below the ground. Jung believed modern human beings often forget their dependence upon invisible things. We become fascinated by achievement, appearance, speed, and control, while forgetting the silent systems that actually sustain life. Perhaps that is why roots feel emotionally meaningful, because they remind us the most essential parts of existence are often the least visible. If we think deeply enough, roots do far more than feed plants. They create soil itself. Without roots, rain would wash fertile earth away. Land would slowly become barren. Forests would collapse. Water systems would fail. And eventually, human life would struggle to survive. According to science, Root systems also help regulate Earth's climate. They store enormous amounts of carbon underground, quietly slowing environmental collapse. A huge part of the planet's stability exists not in machines or cities, but in silent biological networks beneath our feet. Jung believed the human psyche requires similar hidden foundations. Without emotional grounding, memory, connection, and meaning, conscious life becomes fragile. Perhaps that is why modern life can sometimes feel spiritually exhausting, because people have become disconnected from the invisible systems nourishing the soul. Imagine ancient agricultural civilizations. Long before modern science, human beings already understood that healthy soil meant survival. Entire cultures rose beside fertile land. Civilizations depended upon the quiet labor of roots, stabilizing earth, preserving water, and renewing nutrients season after season. Human history itself grew from beneath the ground. Jung believed human beings instinctively search for rootedness, not only physically, but psychologically. People long for belonging, continuity, ancestry, and connection to something enduring, because the psyche, like a tree, cannot survive long without roots. Perhaps that is why people feel calmer in gardens, forests, and fields. Somewhere deep inside, the mind remembers what sustains life. If we think gently about it, roots never demand attention. No one celebrates them the way we celebrate flowers, mountains, or bright cities. And yet, without roots, none of those things could exist. Jung believed many of the most important parts of human life function similarly. Things like trust, love, memory, compassion, and emotional safety rarely appear dramatic from the outside, yet they quietly hold entire lives together. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson roots offer humanity, that survival itself depends upon quiet forms of care most people never notice. Imagine tonight, beneath every forest, field, and garden on Earth, countless roots continue moving silently through darkness. They search for water, nourish life, hold soil together, and sustain ecosystems without rest. No applause, no recognition, no visible reward. And yet human civilization survives because of them. Jung believed the soul contains similar invisible foundations. The deepest things sustaining human beings are rarely loud or visible. Usually they are small moments of connection, quiet memories, hidden kindness, and invisible emotional bonds. Perhaps that is why roots feel sacred, because they remind us life is always being held together by silent things beneath the surface. And maybe that is the most beautiful truth roots offer us before sleep, that even in darkness, beneath noise, fear, and uncertainty, there are still invisible systems quietly supporting life, patiently, endlessly, holding the world together, one hidden thread at a time. Part 9. The microbial worlds around roots. Perhaps one of the most quietly beautiful truths about life is the fact that no living thing truly exists alone. When human beings think about a tree, we usually imagine the trunk, the canopy, branches stretching toward light, and roots drawing water from the earth. Everything appears like an independent organism, a life form, standing alone, growing alone, and silently existing in the world. But somewhere very deep beneath the dark soil, around every tiny root tip, another universe exists. A world, alive, crowded, and almost invisible to human eyes. There are billions of bacteria, fungi, microorganisms, and countless microscopic beings live around every centimeter of root. According to science, the soil surrounding roots is called the rhizosphere, one of the most active and complex places on the entire planet. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, this touches a very deep truth about human life. That life does not flourish through isolation. It flourishes through invisible connection. Imagine a root resting inside moist, dark soil. At first glance, everything appears eye-moning, motionless, almost empty. But in reality, around that single root tip, countless microscopic organisms are moving, exchanging chemicals, breaking down matter, and quietly creating an entire living ecosystem. Perhaps the most astonishing part is this: roots do not simply absorb nutrients, they actively build communities around themselves. Roots release sugars, amino acids, and organic compounds to feed nearby microorganisms. A portion of the energy created from sunlight is quietly shared downward into the earth. Jung believed this mirrors the human psyche almost perfectly. People often imagine they survive through personal strength, individual will, or independence alone. But beneath consciousness, the human soul is also nourished by love, also memory, community, and invisible emotional bonds with others. Perhaps that is why prolonged loneliness hurts so deeply, because somewhere inside, the psyche understands no living being was created to remain completely alone. If we think deeply enough, a healthy root system rarely survives in dead soil. It requires bacteria that transform minerals, fungi that expand access to water, and microscopic communities quietly maintaining balance around it. Human inner life functions similarly. A soul cannot truly grow within isolation, disconnection, or emotional emptiness. Human beings need to be seen, to be heard, and to be nourished through meaningful connection. Perhaps that is the gentlest lesson the rhizosphere offers us. All life requires community. Imagine billions of tiny bacteria living around a root. They decompose matter, create nutrients, protect the plant from disease, and alter the chemistry of the soil itself. In return, the plant continues feeding them energy from sunlight. A silent exchange unfolds every second beneath our feet. Jung believed the collective unconscious functions in a similar way. Each person receives influence from others, while simultaneously influencing the world in return. No one is completely separate from family, culture, history, or the emotional atmosphere of their time. Perhaps that is why emotions can spread between people almost invisibly, because beneath individuality, human minds remain connected through unseen psychological root systems. If we think gently about it, a tree does not treat microorganisms as servants, tools, or inferior beings. Nature does not function through rigid hierarchy, the way human societies often do. Instead, it operates through exchange, interdependence, and endless silent cooperation. Jung believed people suffer deeply when obsessed with control, domination, and isolated identity, because the deepest layers of the psyche understand the healthiest forms of life are always symbiotic. Perhaps that is why nature feels emotionally healing, because it quietly reminds us everything is still connected. Imagine a forest after rainfall. Water slowly sinks into the soil. Beneath the ground, the rhizosphere suddenly becomes even more alive. Microorganisms awaken, exchange signals, multiply, and begin countless invisible processes that keep the earth fertile. No one sees them. No sound rises from below, and yet the entire forest survives because of this silent activity. Jung believed many of the most important parts of human life are equally invisible. We rarely see directly trust, belonging, empathy, or emotional influence between people, yet these things quietly keep the human mind from collapsing. Perhaps that is why small acts of kindness can feel so powerful, because like sugars released by roots, tiny gestures can quietly nourish an invisible community. If we think deeply enough, modern society often teaches people that life is competition, that survival belongs only to the strongest. But beneath the soil, nature continuously tells a different story. The strongest systems of life rarely emerge through domination alone. They emerge through cooperation, adaptability, and the ability to create networks of mutual support. Jung believed a mature psyche does not only strengthen the ego, it also learns to connect, empathize, and recognize itself as part of something larger. Perhaps that is why forests feel wise, because they understand something human beings often forget. No one truly grows alone. Imagine, beneath a single tree, billions of tiny organisms are eating, exchanging, dying, regenerating, and continuously keeping the soil alive. An enormous hidden world inside darkness. Jung believed the unconscious resembles this as well. Beneath conscious awareness, there still exist memories, symbols, emotions, and countless invisible forces quietly shaping life. Perhaps that is why roots always feel symbolic, because they reflect the deepest collective layers of the human mind. If we think long enough, a healthy tree does not only take from the earth, it also gives back. Jung believed human beings are the same. A meaningful life is not built only from receiving, accumulating, or protecting oneself. It is also built from nourishing, connecting, and becoming a source of life too, for something beyond oneself. Perhaps that is why generosity feels spiritually important, because somewhere deep inside, the psyche understands. Life survives through circulation, not possession alone. Imagine tonight, outside your window, a forest rests softly beneath moonlight. Everything above the ground is calm, still, almost silent. But beneath the soil, around every tiny root tip, countless microscopic beings continue quietly, exchanging, supporting, nourishing, and keeping the entire forest alive. No one sees them, no sound reaches the surface, and yet life continues spreading through darkness. Jung believed the human mind exists in the same way. Beneath identity, language, and the appearance of independence, there still remain invisible emotional networks. Love, memory, community, and the ancient need to feel connected to others. And perhaps that is the gentlest truth. The microbial world around roots wishes to tell us before sleep that life does not grow through isolation. It grows through countless invisible connections, quietly nourishing one another in darkness, so the entire world can continue living for one more day. Part 10. Roots help nature return after disaster. Perhaps one of the most quietly hopeful truths about nature is the fact that life often begins again, exactly where human beings believe everything has ended. After a forest fire, everything appears almost impossible to restore. The air smells of ash, the ground turns black, and burned trees stand silently beneath grey skies. A forest, once filled with birdsong, green shadows, and gentle moving light, suddenly becomes empty, silent, almost lifeless. Standing in such a place, human beings instinctively feel everything is gone. But somewhere beneath the ashes, life has not truly disappeared. Deep below the dark soil, root systems remain alive, quietly, patiently, waiting. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, this touches a very deep truth within the human psyche. That rebirth rarely begins in the visible parts of life. It almost always begins within invisible depths. Imagine a forest several weeks after a massive fire. Everything above the ground still appears black, dry, and broken. But beneath the soil, tiny root tips begin, holding water, absorbing minerals, and slowly pushing new shoots back toward the light. Some species are astonishingly resilient. Even if the entire tree above the ground disappears, as long as a small part of the root system survives, life can begin again. Jung believed this is almost a perfect image of the human psyche. There are periods in life when people feel they have lost everything, they are broken beyond repair, or their spirit has become completely exhausted. Yet somewhere beneath conscious despair, there still remain memory, survival instinct, and deep layers of the psyche, quietly refusing to die. Perhaps that is why nature, after disaster, feels so emotional, because it reflects the ancient regenerative capacity inside human beings themselves. If we think deeply enough, roots do not panic when the visible world above them is destroyed. They simply continue, holding the earth, preserving water, and waiting for the right moment to grow again. Jung believed the unconscious possesses a similar patience. Healing rarely happens instantly. It unfolds, silently, in darkness, and often, while consciousness still believes everything is over. Perhaps that is the gentle lesson roots offer us, that sometimes the deepest forms of life still remain, even when we can no longer see them. Imagine the first rainfall touching a burned forest. Water slowly sinks through blackened ash. Beneath the ground, root systems begin awakening. Microorganisms, fungi, bacteria, and entire invisible communities surrounding roots slowly return as well. According to science, roots do not only help trees recover, they also prevent erosion, hold soil together, preserve moisture, and create conditions for ecosystems to begin again. Jung believed the deepest layers of the human mind function similarly after trauma. Sometimes, a small memory, a kind person, or a tiny fragment of hope is enough to save an entire soul. Because, like roots, invisible things often hold life together. If we think gently about it, nature is never completely hopeless. Even after fires, floods, volcanic eruptions, or storms, life somehow finds a path back, not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily. Jung believed the human psyche contains a similarly ancient regenerative force. He believed that beneath suffering, there still exists a movement toward balance, healing, and becoming whole once again. Perhaps that is why human beings survive experiences they once believed impossible to endure, because somewhere very deep, the inner root system continues holding the soul alive. Imagine a hillside after wildfire. Without roots, rain would wash the soil away, collapse the hillside, and transform entire ecosystems into wasteland. But the remaining roots beneath the earth quietly hold everything together. They embrace the soil, preserve water, and prepare the foundation for new life. Jung believed human beings also require psychological roots, memory, values, love, and belonging. These things quietly prevent the psyche from being swept away by suffering. Perhaps that is why healing often begins by reconnecting with, meaning, ancient truths and deeply rooted parts of oneself. If we think deeply enough, some plants are even more astonishing. Certain species can regrow from tiny surviving root fragments or create entirely new forests. From a single surviving root network, life may become fragmented, damaged, almost erased, and yet still continue. Jung believed this is a powerful image of transformation. Human beings often assume that moving forward means everything must return exactly as it was before. But nature teaches something different. Rebirth rarely recreates the old version perfectly. Instead, it often becomes quieter, deeper, and somehow stronger. Perhaps that is why many people become gentler, wiser, and more connected to life after great suffering, because the superficial parts burned away, revealing something more real underneath. Imagine beneath ashes tonight. Tiny green shoots begin appearing, small enough to almost miss. Yet eventually, an entire forest may return, not because of one sudden miracle, but because of countless silent root systems, endless patience, and the invisible persistence of life itself. Jung believed healing unfolds within the human mind the same way, not through magical moments or perfect answers, but through tiny movements, repeated quietly, deep beneath awareness. Perhaps that is why nature feels spiritually truthful, because it never promises you will never suffer. Instead, it quietly whispers, life can begin again. If we think long enough, modern human beings fear loss, failure, and dark periods of life. We instinctively assume that collapse means ending, but nature repeatedly reveals endings and beginnings often grow from the same place. Jung believed psychological crises can sometimes become necessary for transformation. Like a burned forest, parts of the old self sometimes must collapse, so something deeper can emerge. Perhaps that is why so many Jungian dreams occur within caves, underground places, or darkness, because the unconscious understands the deepest rebirth always begins beneath the surface. Imagine tonight a burned forest resting silently beneath moonlight. Dark trunks stand motionless. The faint smell of ash still lingers in the air. Everything above appears empty, broken, almost asleep forever. But somewhere beneath the soil, countless roots continue quietly, holding the earth, gathering water, and preparing for life to return. No one sees them. No sound rises from below. And yet the entire future of the forest depends upon those invisible depths. Jung believed the human soul heals in the same way. The deepest parts of the psyche rarely die completely, rarely disappear, and are often stronger than consciousness believes. And perhaps that is the most hopeful truth roots offer us before sleep, that the strongest forms of life rarely exist in visible places. They live inside darkness, beneath ashes, and within silent depths, where everything appears finished, yet quietly prepares to begin once more. Part 11: Roots and the Climate of Earth. Perhaps one of the most quietly astonishing truths about Earth is the fact that part of the future of this planet's climate is resting silently beneath our feet. When human beings think about climate change, we often imagine massive storms, melting polar ice, smoke rising from cities, or skies growing hotter each year. Everything seems to happen in the atmosphere, across the sky, and within the enormous movements of the planet itself. But somewhere beneath the silent dark soil, root systems continue performing an ancient task, quietly helping the world remain in balance. According to science, roots do not only absorb water or keep trees standing upright, they also store carbon beneath the earth. An enormous amount of Earth's carbon is held in soil, within root systems, and throughout invisible organic networks beneath the entire planet. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, this touches a very deep truth about human life, that the most important things often happen quietly, within invisible depths. Imagine an endless grassland beneath sunset. At first glance, everything appears as simpler, soft, almost empty. There are no towering trees, dramatic mountains, or ancient forests. Only grass moving in the wind, pale golden light, and open land stretching toward the horizon. Yet beneath that soil, an enormous network of roots quietly exists. According to science, grasslands are among the most important carbon storage systems on Earth, because most of the life of grass does not exist above the surface. It exists within deep roots, countless organic fibers, and rich soil built slowly over thousands of years. Jung believed this resembles the human psyche. People often judge life through appearance, visible achievements, or what can easily be seen. But beneath consciousness, the invisible depths are what truly maintain balance, preserve memory and quietly shape the survival of the soul. Perhaps that is why nature feels wise, because it continuously reminds us the deepest things are rarely the most visible. If we think deeply enough, a root system does not only nourish plants, it also holds the soil, preserves water, and prevents the earth from being swept away by storms and wind. Without roots, soil slowly becomes unstable, dry, and increasingly fragile. Human beings are similar. No one remains truly stable without inner roots, belonging, or values deep enough to keep the soul grounded. Perhaps that is why modern life often feels exhausting. Many people live disconnected from nature, disconnected from community, and disconnected from the deeper layers of themselves. Like soil without roots, the human mind slowly becomes fragile when nothing remains to hold it together. Imagine rain falling upon healthy land. The water does not immediately disappear. Root systems hold moisture, help the soil absorb rainfall, and quietly preserve life for future dry seasons. According to science, soil rich with healthy roots can store enormous amounts of water, helping ecosystems remain resilient against drought, extreme temperatures, and climate instability. Jung believed this resembles psychological resilience. A person with strong inner roots does not necessarily avoid suffering, but they possess the ability to preserve hope, absorb experience, and avoid collapsing immediately under hardship. Perhaps that is the gentle lesson roots whisper to us. The deepest strength is often quiet. If we think long enough, carbon itself feels strangely poetic. It once floated through the atmosphere, was absorbed by plants through sunlight, and was slowly buried underground through, roots, decaying leaves, and countless ancient cycles of life and death. Part of Earth's climate depends entirely upon this silent cycle. Jung believed inner life functions similarly. Memories, emotions, and experiences do not simply disappear. Instead, they settle, become stored within us, and slowly transform into the soil from which the future self grows. Perhaps that is why healing requires time, because the deepest changes must first be buried and transformed within unconscious depths. Imagine Earth viewed from above. Forests, grasslands, and fertile landscapes appear like an enormous green nervous system covering the planet. Beneath everything, countless roots continue quietly, storing carbon, holding water, and keeping life stable. No one sees them. No headlines speak of them. No sound rises from below. And yet, they are silently supporting the future of Earth's climate. Jung believed many things that save human beings are invisible in the same way. Not power, noise, or dramatic gestures, but often quiet love, belonging, meaningful memory, or a connection deep enough of you to prevent the soul from collapsing. Perhaps that is why nature feels spiritually honest, because it never glorifies the surface alone. If we think gently about it, an ancient root system may require centuries to build fertile soil. Yet, war, deforestation, or overexploitation can destroy everything very quickly. Jung believed the human psyche is fragile in a similar way. Inner foundations such as trust, stability, and emotional balance take a long time to develop, yet they can be damaged surprisingly fast. Perhaps that is why both nature and the human soul require patience and respect for invisible things. Imagine land without roots. Wind slowly carries fertile soil away. Rain moves faster, removes nutrients, and leaves the earth exhausted and dry. A soul, disconnected from its deeper layers, can become similarly depleted, directionless, and emotionally barren. Perhaps that is why modern human beings constantly search for: meaning, connection, and the feeling of being rooted in the world, because somewhere deep inside, the psyche understands. Nothing survives well when completely uprooted. If we think deeply enough, roots never seek attention. They are unseen, uncelebrated, and almost always hidden within darkness. Yet all life above the surface depends entirely upon them. The deepest parts of human beings often function in the same way. What truly keeps us alive is frequently invisible: silent courage, hidden memories, or love that is never loudly spoken. Perhaps that is why darkness beneath the soil feels strangely comforting, because it is a place that preserves, nourishes, and quietly prepares the future. Imagine tonight, outside your window, a wide field rests silently beneath moonlight. Soft wind moves through the grass. Everything above appears peaceful, it's almost asleep. But beneath the soil, countless root systems continue quietly, storing carbon, preserving water, and keeping the earth alive. No one sees them. No sound rises from below. Yet part of the future of the entire planet rests inside those invisible depths. Jung believed the human soul survives in the same way. Beneath thoughts, social identity, and conscious surface life, there still exist deeper layers quietly, preserving, balancing, and preventing the psyche from dissolving within a changing world. And perhaps that is the most beautiful truth. Roots wish to tell us before sleep that what saves the world rarely exists in visible places. It exists within darkness, beneath the earth, and inside silent networks, quietly supporting life on this planet, through days, through seasons, and through countless generations passing above them. Part 12. What humanity learns from roots. Perhaps one of the most quietly humbling truths about humanity is the fact that, after thousands of years building civilization, modern technology is slowly returning to learn from nature. When people imagine the future, they often picture robots, artificial intelligence, smart cities, and increasingly advanced machines. Human beings have long believed that progress means moving away from nature, overcoming biological limits, and creating systems more intelligent than the natural world itself. But strangely, the more science advances, the more it discovers something unexpected. Nature solved many problems long before human beings existed, and somewhere beneath the silent, dark soil, ancient root systems are quietly becoming inspiration for humanity's future. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, this touches a very deep truth within the human psyche, that the deepest wisdom does not always belong to what is newest. Sometimes it lives within ancient structures human beings have forgotten how to listen to. Imagine a tiny root growing through soil. It has no eyes, no brain, no map, and yet somehow it still manages to find water, avoid stone, choose efficient paths, and adapt to constantly changing environments. According to science, this is why many robotics researchers have begun studying root behavior. Some experimental robots today no longer move through wheels or mechanical legs. Instead, they grow like roots, slowly, patiently, adaptively. Jung believed this is deeply symbolic. Modern civilization often worships speed, strength, and control, but nature repeatedly demonstrates that the deepest forms of survival sometimes emerge through flexibility, sensitivity, and quiet adaptation. Perhaps that is why roots feel psychologically meaningful, because they reflect a softer form of intelligence, one far older than human civilization itself. If we think deeply enough, roots do not attempt to destroy every obstacle or conquer their environment. Instead, they sense, adjust, and find the least destructive path toward continued life. Jung believed this is something the modern psyche often forgets. Human beings frequently assume every problem must be controlled, forced, or defeated through strength. Yet healing and growth often arrive through listening, adapting, and moving gently through life, the way roots move through soil. Perhaps that is why nature often feels wiser than civilization, because it never rushes. Imagine the future of agriculture, a world becoming hotter, drier, and increasingly unpredictable. Human beings are slowly realizing that survival cannot rely only upon larger machines, stronger chemicals, or more aggressive control. Instead, science is increasingly focusing on smarter root systems, drought-resistant plants, and biological structures naturally capable of resilience. Research shows many plants survive harsh climates, not because of what exists above the surface, but because their roots are deeper, more flexible, and more connected with soil and microorganisms. Jung believed this resembles resilience within human beings. A strong person is not necessarily someone who is the loudest, the hardest, or perfectly in control. Sometimes, strength belongs simply to those who are more deeply rooted, more connected, true, and more adaptable to change. Perhaps that is the quiet lesson roots are teaching humanity. That survival does not always belong to the strongest. It often belongs to those who adapt most deeply. If we think gently about it, there is something strangely beautiful about the fact that our most futuristic technologies are inspired by Earth's most ancient structures. Robots are learning from how roots sense, how they branch, and how they grow through uncertainty. After centuries spent attempting to dominate nature, human beings are slowly becoming students of the planet once again. Jung believed this reflects a collective psychological movement, because eventually the psyche realizes human beings are not separate from nature, we are part of it, and perhaps the deepest wisdom has always been waiting there. Imagine a modern laboratory, white lights, computers, engineers quietly observing a tiny robot growing through soil like a root, a scene simultaneously futuristic and ancient beyond words. Jung believed this resembles individuation, the psychological journey through which human beings eventually return toward listening, connection, and instinctive wisdom. After centuries of ambition, control, and separation from nature, the psyche slowly begins turning back toward deeper forms of understanding. Perhaps that is why modern people feel increasingly fascinated by forests, soil, fungi, and invisible ecosystems. Because somewhere very deep, human beings remember we once belonged to them. If we think long enough, roots never grow in perfectly straight lines. They curve, change direction, and continuously respond to their environment. Human life unfolds similarly. People often desire certainty, clear plans, and predictable paths. But the deepest layers of the psyche understand real growth is rarely linear. It twists, changes, and sometimes moves downward by bay, before rising again, just like roots searching through darkness. Perhaps that is why roots feel emotionally comforting, because they quietly remind us we do not need perfection in order to continue growing. Imagine a future world shaped by climate change, many regions becoming hotter, drier, and increasingly difficult to cultivate. In such a world, future agriculture may depend upon deeper root systems, plants capable of better communication with microorganisms, and soil able to preserve water silently beneath the surface. What saves humanity may not only be larger technologies or greater power. It may also be a deeper understanding of how nature has quietly survived for millions of years. Jung believed this represents an important symbolic shift, a movement away from domination toward cooperation with the natural world. Perhaps this is part of the collective maturation humanity is slowly learning. If we think deeply enough, roots do not compete for attention. They remain invisible, avoid recognition, and quietly support all life above them. The deepest parts of the human soul often function similarly. What truly keeps people alive is often invisible: patience, adaptability, and silent connection with the surrounding world. Perhaps that is why nature feels spiritually grounding, because it reminds us the strongest things are not always the loudest. Imagine tonight, beneath the dark and gentle soil of earth, countless roots continue quietly, sensing changing direction, finding water, and adapting to a constantly changing world. No noise, no machines, no artificial light. Yet for millions of years, they have perfected the art of survival better than many human civilizations. And somewhere inside modern laboratories, human beings are quietly attempting to relearn those ancient lessons. Jung believed the human soul matures similarly, not by separating from nature or controlling everything, but by listening, connecting, and remembering. The deepest wisdom often emerges from the invisible foundations of life itself. And perhaps that is the most beautiful truth roots wish to tell us before sleep, that the future will not be built only from steel, machines, or enormous cities. It will also be built within the darkness of the soil, within the patience of nature, and within ancient lessons this planet quietly wrote, long before human beings learned to look up at the stars. Part 13. The silent strength beneath everything. Perhaps one of the most quietly profound truths about life is the fact that the things holding the world together often exist in silence. When human beings look at nature, we are usually drawn toward enormous mountains, endless oceans, vast forests, or skies filled with light and drifting clouds. Visible things naturally inspire wonder. But somewhere beneath all that beauty, hidden under east soil, darkness, and the silent depths of the planet, another world continues to exist. A world almost never seen. Roots, quietly, patiently, holding everything together. Throughout this journey, we have slowly stepped into that invisible world. We have seen roots breaking stone, holding the earth together, feeding forests, connecting trees with fungi, building microbial communities, storing carbon, and quietly helping the entire planet continue living. At first glance, roots appear small, dark, and unimportant. Yet without them, the entire world above would collapse. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, this touches a very deep truth within the human psyche, that the most important things rarely exist on the visible surface. They live within invisible depths beneath consciousness. If we think gently enough, a tree does not stand upright because of leaves, flowers, or visible beauty. It stands because of what nobody sees. Its roots. It's silent, buried in darkness, and never seeking attention. Jung believed the human soul functions similarly. What truly keeps us alive is often invisible. Memory, love, instinct, belief, and deep inner connection within the unconscious. Perhaps that is why modern people often feel lost, because we live inside a world obsessed with surfaces, speed, and loudly visible things. Meanwhile, the deepest parts of life continue quietly within silence. Imagine a forest at night. Everything above appears dark, iform, and almost asleep. No one sees. Roots holding the soil, microorganisms exchanging nutrients, or countless invisible connections beneath the forest floor. And yet those hidden layers are what keep the forest alive. Jung believed the unconscious functions in the same way. People rarely realize how many memories quietly shape emotion, how many ancient symbols still live within them, or how many invisible layers silently support the self each day. Perhaps that is why nature feels spiritually truthful, because it reflects exactly how the soul itself is built. If we think deeply enough, roots never hurry. They do not compete for attention, do not chase visibility, and are almost never seen. Yet through years, centuries, even millennia, they quietly break stone, create soil, and reshape entire worlds. Jung believed the deepest human transformations rarely appear dramatic. Healing often unfolds in silence, within inner darkness, and very slowly. Some changes are never witnessed, are never applauded, yet still reshape the soul completely. Perhaps that is why patience feels sacred, because the deepest forms of life have never been rushed. Imagine endless grasslands beneath sunset, wind moving softly through golden fields. At first glance, everything appears delicate, temporary, almost fragile. Yet beneath the soil, an enormous root network quietly stores carbon, preserves water, and prevents the earth from disappearing. Part of Earth's climate depends entirely upon that silent underground world. Jung believed human beings also carry invisible psychological root systems, family, culture, collective memory, and ancient archetypes. We rarely see them directly, yet they still shape emotions, dreams, and the way we exist within the world. Perhaps that is why so many experiences feel deeper than logic, because they are rooted within layers older than consciousness itself. If we think long enough, a root system does not only keep a tree alive, it is also connected with fungi, bacteria, as a plant through water, and countless other forms of life. Jung believed no human being is truly isolated. Beneath individuality, all minds remain connected through an invisible collective depth. Perhaps that is why loneliness hurts so deeply, because somewhere ancient within the psyche, life remembers it was never meant to exist alone. Imagine a forest after wildfire. Everything above appears dead, broken, and hopeless. Yet beneath the ashes, the roots remain quietly alive. Then, rain arrives, tiny shoots emerge, and life slowly returns. Jung believed human beings heal in the same way. The deepest layers of the psyche rarely disappear completely, and are often stronger than conscious thought believes. Perhaps that is why even after great suffering, people somehow continue living, because beneath despair, invisible roots still quietly keep the soul alive. If we think gently enough, this entire planet is supported by things that are invisible, is and silent. Not only roots or the soil beneath our feet, but also unspoken love, small acts of kindness, ancient memory, and emotional connections, quietly holding human beings together. Jung believed the unconscious is not only a place of darkness, it is also where humanity stores ancient wisdom, survival instinct, and the capacity for healing beyond conscious understanding. Perhaps that is why darkness is not always frightening. Sometimes it is where life is quietly nourished. Imagine the entire world sleeping tonight. Cities becoming quieter, softer, and slower as people drift into dreams. Beneath, streets, forests, grasslands, and dark mountains, countless root systems continue silently, holding the earth, preserving water, feeding microorganisms, and connecting life together. No one sees them, no applause reaches them, no sound rises from below, and yet the world continues standing. Because of those invisible depths, Jung believed the human soul survives similarly. Beneath thoughts, spoken words, and conscious identity, there still exists a silent inner system, instinct, memory, love, scent, and the collective unconscious, quietly supporting the self every day. And perhaps that is the gentlest truth roots wish to tell us before sleep, that the most important things do not need to be seen. They quietly exist, quietly support, and quietly keep life continuing. Beneath every forest, beneath every city, and beneath every human soul, drifting softly through this temporary world, because somewhere very deep beneath everything, there is always an invisible system, ancient, patient, and endlessly faithful, silently preventing the world from falling apart within the darkness.